And so just before Arthabandhu kind of steps in for the last time for this part of the series on Thicket of Views, just to remind us really very briefly what we explored last week, and very much exploring the wisdom that's not mediated by words and concepts. So welcome Arthabandhu, and we look forward to another evening with you.
Thank you, Buddy Diane. Just get myself set up. Yeah, so week 4, final talk. It's been interesting. They've got harder and harder to write as the weeks have gone on, and closer and closer to the deadline, if you like. There's no gardening metaphors. That's not my thing. So I won't go there. I'm not going to try and make any up. I've detoured from my description of what I was going to cover. The blurb that you might have read. We're not going to talk about the tantric masters, unfortunately. That's for another day. And I've been just something based on something I've read recently. I've been reading a book about dreams of famous people by a Jungian analyst called Marie-Louise von Franz, who was around contemporary of Jung and studied with him and was an analyst in her own right. So I'm going to talk about Descartes, who she talks about one of his dreams. So he's a philosopher, French philosopher from around 1600s. This isn't going to turn into a philosophy lecture. It's not really like that, what the story I'm going to tell about Descartes. In a way, it's going to kind of compare him a bit to as somebody who's been reflecting upon reality, and for him, he has this significant night where he has a series of 3 dreams, and he comes to sort of understand something in a deeper, more profound way. And I want to just sort of draw a few connections with that and what we've been talking about, but also to sort of say, in a way, obviously he's not a Buddhist, and he hasn't sort of set out to do what we set out to do as Buddhists. So it's not really a criticism of him, but just to sort of look at how he has his sort of journey is similar to what we might be setting out on or involved with, but different as well, and how he kind of differs to the Buddha in what his approach to these questions. So I'm going to tell you, use that as a bit of a theme for the first part of the talk, and then for the second, I'm going to kind of try and wrap up the 3 levels of wisdom by revisiting each of them again and giving you another kind of condensed version of the lists that I've been sharing with you. So we'll have another little list this time about all 3 of the 3 levels of wisdom, and hopefully that will form a nice kind of neat parcel for this series. Okay, so I'm going to start, as I said, with this story about Descartes. So yes, as I said, don't worry if the word philosophy and Descartes, all that sort of thing, puts you off. This isn't really about his ideas as such. It's more about his journey to develop these ideas and his understanding. Okay. So this is sort of early in Descartes' career as a philosopher, if you like. He was working apparently on a theory that would unite the sciences and mathematics and algebra and kind of tie it all together, which sounds like quite a challenge to set yourself. And I couldn't tell you anything about the details of that. But he'd basically sort of immersed himself in this project. And they go to start off with is the fact that he's really keen to kind of answer this question. explore this area and find wisdom and knowledge. A different aim, if you like, a different subject, if you like, to what we're engaged with in the Dharma. But yes, he's still sort of got this intensity of a search and a desire to come to know something more deeply. So that's one of the first things I'll say. So you could say he'd been reflecting and thinking about this subject in the way that we might reflect and think about the Dharma. And these questions, like I said, they were sort of important to him. He could get his emotions behind them. He had a strong desire to know the truth of these things. So it's not dissimilar to what we've been talking about already in the early stages of this teaching of the 3 levels of wisdom. So his version of hearing the Dharma would have been to kind of immerse himself in the philosophical tradition of his time, learn from the greats of his time and those before them, come to know the topic very clearly, come to know all the concepts very thoroughly, be kind of proficient in them. And now we kind of join him. He's obviously sort of spent much time doing this, and now he's a kind of expert, if you like. And now he's in a sort of more creative phase. He's reflecting and coming up with his own ideas, his own theories. So we join him at this point, if you like. And he's got he's quite into going off to find a kind of cabin in the woods to sit on his own and meditate or reflect and think and spend time just being silent and reducing input and just sort of focusing everything on his kind of the questions he wants to answer, focusing all his energy and his time. So I think he's probably sort of, perhaps he is in one of these cabins somewhere, and this is when this happened. I don't know that detail. So he gets to the point where he's actually really quite inspired. He feels like he's on the cusp of something with his work, and he tells us that on the 10th of November 1619, he was still filled with enthusiasm and completely absorbed by the thought of having that day discovered the foundations of a marvelous science. So we're told this is the mood that he sort of went to bed in, this sort of really quite inspired and the sense and confidence that he was on the right track. And then, so he goes to bed and he has a series of dreams, like 3 or 4 different dreams. And in the end, he sort of wakes up and feels like he's really been shown something during his dreams. And he says he feels that night from these dreams that he discovered things of a higher order, things divine and heavenly. So I'd say, if this were in relation to the Dharma, Descartes is doing very well if he sort of has this sort of sense about what he's seeing and what's unfolding for him. And the 3 levels of wisdom are sort of moving from reflection, perhaps sort of touching into meditation. He's got fully into this quest for truth and wisdom, so much so that, yes, he's saying he's filled with enthusiasm and completely absorbed. So if we had this feeling around topics we were reflecting on, this would be a really good indication that the reflection practice was going well. Yeah, so it's started to really matter for him, and in a way, that's indicated as well that things are happening in his dreams that relate to these topics and these subjects he wants to pursue. If you are really getting into the Dharma, really exploring and reflecting upon the Dharma, maybe under the conditions of being on a retreat or something like that, you might notice this more strongly. You'll probably see that you start to have insights or openings that come to you in your dreams. So it's worth paying attention to dreams, if you're as you practice the Dharma, I think you probably find that there are times where it does sort of seem to come into your dream life, and there it's often of quite a different character to sort of ordinary thoughts you might have. It's almost like we can kind of come at the Dharma from a different angle with a different parts of ourselves. So I'm not going to give you every bit of detail about the dreams that Descartes has that night, but I just want to give you a flavour and perhaps say a little bit about what struck me about his dreams. So first of all, he dreams that he's walking through streets at night, and there are ghosts in the town that he's walking through, and he's quite terrified and afraid by this. Yeah, so he's sort of very, very stirred up by this experience. And then he says the next thing to happen is a great gust of wind starts to blow, and it blows very intensely. So much so that he's sort of bent over trying to sort of resist this wind from blowing him down. So my sort of take on what he's talking about with this dream so far is this sort of to give just a light bit of interpretation. There's a lot of energy kind of stirring in the dream. There's a lot of forces he's kind of encountering that feel like they're coming from beyond him, from outside of him. And there's something with dreams of the supernatural and ghosts in this case. There's something also a bit sort of uncanny about the dream, a bit spooky. And he's afraid. It's quite sort of natural that he's afraid with those kinds of dreams. And if I was to risk sort of interpreting a bit further what that might kind of indicate, I'd say perhaps it indicates that he is on a kind of threshold, on the edge of a sort of big shift and a bit of a breakthrough in his thinking, in his explorations. But for this to come through, he really needs to sort of start to relax a bit and sort of let the experience unfold. So there's another little dream section that comes, and he says in this one, it was simply that there was a loud clap of thunder, and he sort of wakes up immediately, sort of terrified again. But he hasn't actually woken up. He's sort of in some sort of in-between state of consciousness, because as he looks around his room, he sees these what he describes as fiery sparks kind of flickering and floating in the air around him. And he kind of gets a bit of a grip now. He kind of just calms himself and just starts to appreciate this experience and starts to kind of feel some sort of wonder about what's going on. And then he wakes from that dream too. And then he says he's awake for 2 hours, and he's in this sort of quite strong sort of mood of he's praying to God for sort of protection from these dark dreams he's having, and he's sort of asking for help from a higher force, if you like. And then he has the last of these dreams. He finds himself in the college grounds of whatever university Descartes was working at. He finds himself there, and then inside the college, in a great library, and there he meets a stranger who shows him different books, shows him a huge dictionary that sort of mentions these different subjects that Descartes is trying to bring together and kind of bring together in his theory. And then this figure also points out a particular poem in a book. And all this, I was reading what it was, but it didn't really mean much to me. But to Descartes, it's all starting to kind of fall into place for him. All these strands of his thinking and his explorations are being kind of very kind of creatively brought together and integrated through this experience that he's having. It's sort of unlocking things and helping him solve the riddles of these problems for him. And then he wakes in the morning and he's just very moved by this experience, quite sort of amazed. And later, I've been reading that he brought out a book called Olympica, which apparently was sort of based on the thinking and all the reflections, all the ideas that came from this experience. And I was reading today that there's some debate about what this title Olympica might mean and might refer to. But the closest I got to sort of having an inkling was the connection with Olympus, the mountain where all the gods dwell and live. And perhaps it's Descartes sort of alluding to this sort of his inspiration, his ideas kind of coming from the gods in the form of this dream. So I really enjoyed this account of Descartes' dreams, and sort of I've read a bit of Descartes in the past as a philosophy student, but I was never sort of told about the kind of context in which he came up with his ideas and how he developed his work. And it really touched me to sort of just hear this sort of real adventure of how he's sort of thrown himself into this pursuit of some sort of higher wisdom. And it's not the way philosophers are often talked about. So even Descartes is sort of known to be talked about as though he's a bit sort of heady and a bit kind of abstract. But when you sort of read this side of the story, and perhaps you can also see, as I see, that there's a certain kind of soulfulness in how he's approached these problems. He's really sort of put his heart into his pursuit, his philosophical pursuit. And I feel I can kind of relate to that in a way with what I'm trying to do in the practice of Buddhism, and sort of trying to sort of approach these mysterious teachings and what they point to. It feels something like I'm getting from Descartes' description. And this thing that I sort of touched on, that he had these spooky, frightening experiences, as I'm saying, that he seemed to get kind of, as he got closer to this kind of breakthrough, it all got a bit kind of dangerous, or felt a bit dangerous and threatening. I think that can be sometimes not always the case, but at certain points in our journey and in our kind of exploring the Dharma in relation to our lives, it can be quite frightening. There's something about really understanding the Dharma would involve for us a real kind of paradigm shift within us, a real kind of turning around of how we understand the world and ourselves. And as you kind of broach that, and as you kind of sense that that's what's coming, in a way, quite naturally, you feel some fear and apprehension. So yeah, I got quite a lot from just sort of reading about Descartes in that way. But it also got me thinking about what are the differences between what we're doing and what Descartes was up to, and sort of what the Buddha was about, and what he was trying to do, and what Descartes was trying to do. So as a philosopher, Descartes was trying to sort of come up with theories that sort of explained reality, and kind of in a way, kind of, I'm probably not doing justice to him, but sort of tried to pin down what the truth is, and what's going on, and how to explain all this experience of ours. And I'd like to suggest that that's quite different to what the Buddha was doing, although it might look quite similar, because we have statements from the Buddha about, in a way, sort of about the nature of life, and sort of what's true and what's not true. But like we've been looking at, the Buddha also said that what he taught was actually a raft. It wasn't meant to be a sort of ultimate statement about reality, about truths of the world. And actually, he would probably suggest that actually it was only kind of provisionally true. It was only true up to a certain point. And that's sort of what we mean by right view, that it's not the ultimate understanding of reality that nirvana or enlightenment will give us, but it's true enough that it will help us kind of get there, help us arrive at that point. So I was also imagining what would have happened if the Descartes had the encounter I described that Abhayakirti at Nalanda University had with this crone at the window who said, "Do you understand the words or the meaning?" And I think in some ways Descartes does go beyond just playing with words and logic, and just the way that his heart was obviously in this pursuit, and he was sort of moved and having sort of spiritual experiences as he went about it. But I think what can happen if you're sort of aiming to come up with a kind of philosophical theory is that the theory starts to dominate what you're focusing on, and rather than be with that experience that could have been kind of taken deeper, taken further, you quickly kind of jump back from those experiences and start writing your great tomes of philosophy and tell everyone what it's all about and what you saw and what you know. And in a way, I'd dare to suggest that Descartes had just sort of scratched the surface, and that dream, although it had spiritual significance and was sort of insightful, was just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And somebody like the Buddha, rather than take that and write philosophy and write tombs of philosophy, dived deeper and sort of went further with the experience itself, followed that up rather than tried to sort of translate it into concepts. Anyway, that was my sort of me getting interested in this story of Descartes and kind of drawing some parallels with what we've been looking at. And I want to just sort of move it on now and come back to the three levels of wisdom. And so I've got another list for you, which in a way is pretty much a revisit to what I've talked about before. But now that we've done that whole journey, seen all three of them, I can perhaps talk about them in a bit of a different way, and give us a little bit more of a different kind of take on them. So I've got 2 points for each of the levels of wisdom. So I'll just go through them. So the first level of wisdom is the wisdom based on hearing the Dharma or reading the Dharma. And the first point I sort of thought was important to emphasize was that in the course of our Dharma life, really what we want to think about is that we actually keep coming back to the teachings. They're not for us to kind of read once or even kind of study quite intensively for a period and then we've got it and then we move on. What I've found in the time I've practiced the Dharma is that there's a value to coming back to them again and again. And particularly in a way as your experience in reflection or meditation starts to deepen. What I think this makes possible is that you can then come back to Dharma texts you might have read before, or even just hearing the basics over and over again is valuable. But when you've since had some experience, when you come back to these teachings that you maybe encountered the first time you came to the Buddhist center, you'll be a different person in a sense, and you'll be in a position to sort of see more and see things you didn't see the first time round. And in a way, we just keep doing that. We keep revisiting the Dharma, then we put it into practice, then we kind of meditate, see what arises, what fruits come, and then we kind of just put it back in the machine, which isn't a very nice image analogy, but we just keep revisiting, doing those three levels of wisdom, if you like, over and over again. And it really kind of develops your understanding through doing that. So that's the first point. Keep coming back to the Dharma teachings again and again, even if you have the feeling that you know it now, particularly if you have that feeling. And then the second one I've got here is remember the Buddha's words about the Dharma as a raft. So even though we're saying, oh, the Dharma is very important and you need to kind of keep making that contact with it, it's also important to remember that the Dharma isn't the ultimate truth, isn't the final destination, if you like. Yeah, there's much more involved than just understanding the concepts. And in the end, we need to let go of the Dharma. So the second level of wisdom is the wisdom based on reflecting upon the Dharma. And here I thought it was good for myself as well as for everyone else, I'm sure, to emphasize that we need to, if we want to sort of do this, if we want to bring reflection into our lives, we probably need to be quite disciplined about making that happen. We can't just have a kind of vague intention or a vague sense that that's a good idea. We're probably going to have to decide that we really want to do that and make it happen, like change your life to some extent to enable you to do that in a disciplined way. And it might be small changes. It might just be carving out a small amount of time to sit and reflect and to give yourself time and space to do that. It doesn't have to be hours and hours you're looking for, but just making some regular time in your week where you can do that. And I thought it might be worth, this could be something for discussion in your groups. If you think that's going to be different, you can just sort of consider why, what's stopping yourself from doing it. Is it a kind of view in itself, or so exploring if you could do that, and maybe also exploring if you really want to do that. That could be the thing. If you really want to do it, we can. It's possible to make a lot happen. The second, in relation to reflection, is to keep bringing the Dharma into contact with your experience, or into contact with your life, is another way of putting that. And this is emphasizing that it's important, if it's to be real reflection, it's important that it doesn't just stay at the level of ideas. And the way to bring ideas alive and to make it more meaningful for us is to reflect on real situations that matter to you and apply the Dharma. And in a way I had that phrase of bringing the Dharma off the page. So that's what will help that happen. Reflect on real situations that matter to you and apply the Dharma. And again, I'd suggest with this one, you might have to keep going back to this as well. You might kind of find that you do that quite well for a period, and then actually you might be like Descartes, where you kind of have a bit of a interesting experience, and then you just get intoxicated by ideas that are kind of triggered by that or around that. And you might have to kind of clock that and realize, oh, I've just got into thinking about, it's very interesting what happened to me, but I've just kind of got stuck in thinking about that and having all sorts of views about that. And that in itself can become this thicket of views that kind of blinds us and blocks us in progress. So success can be quite, if you don't kind of work well with the fruits of that come from your practice, you might kind of get lost in a bit of a side road. So yes, keep bringing the Dharma into contact with your life, with your experience. And then the third level of wisdom is wisdom based on meditating upon the Dharma. And I've slipped in a third point for this one. It was an afterthought, but I thought it was important. And I think to have any chance of developing this kind of wisdom, maybe that's a bit strong, but I think it's really important to at least have a daily meditation practice. A lot of the time, my daily meditation practice is quite sort of ordinary, but I think it's the fact that I've sort of done that for a long time, quite consistently, that occasionally I kind of go a bit deeper, see a bit more. So I think that's necessary if we're hoping for any sort of wisdom coming from meditating upon the Dharma, that you're practicing regularly meditation. The second bit of advice for wisdom based on meditation is advice that comes from the teacher Padmasambhava. So in a particular text, there's just a short section where he says, "Let these three expressions, I do not have, I do not understand, I do not know, be repeated over and over again." So it's, in a way, it's a way of sort of stopping us from thinking we've worked it all out and we've kind of come to the end. Maybe Padmasambhava would have said Descartes really needs to sort of keep saying that to himself as well. I do not have, I do not understand, I do not know. And that gives us the right attitude so that we can kind of keep looking, keep exploring without coming to any sort of premature conclusions, and we keep looking deeper. And then the last point, and the last one on meditation, is be prepared to be in mysteries and doubts. And I've written here, real exploration of the Dharma will take you into the unknown. And I encourage you to allow the Dharma to take you deeper and deeper. So that's about all I can think of to say on this subject of the three levels of wisdom and views. And yeah, it's been a nice opportunity to have you as an audience and sort of study this subject myself and share what I've found. So thank you. Hope you've enjoyed the series. Hopefully they'll let me do something similar again. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Arthabandhu. Yes, very enjoyable, and very struck by the Padmasambhava's emergence there towards the end.